Old maps did not leave the ocean empty. They filled it with coiling serpents, ship-crushing tentacles, and birds large enough to carry elephants into the clouds. They were warnings, not decoration. The easy explanation is that frightened people invented monsters. But sometimes a legend begins with a perfectly real thing, seen once, badly, under the worst possible conditions. These 7 creatures were not secretly magical animals. Their stories are stranger than that. Fragments of biology, geology, and human fear, stitched together by centuries of retelling. Start in the cold waters of Scandinavia, where fishermen spoke of the kraken, a creature so broad that sailors mistook its back for an island. The sea seemed to breathe beneath them. Later artists gave it endless arms and an appetite for entire ships. The details grew theatrical, but the basic shape was not invented from nothing. Even exaggeration needs a first sketch. Giant squid spend most of their lives far below sunlight. For centuries, people knew them mainly from rotting bodies, scarred whales, or a pale arm hauled from a net. A living giant squid has eyes the size of dinner plates and a body built for darkness. Some specimens stretch well beyond the length of a city bus. Modern cameras finally recorded one in its own deep water world. It did not attack the equipment, it simply appeared, silver and enormous, then vanished beyond the light. No verified giant squid has dragged a ship under. Yet imagine seeing one tentacle beside a wooden boat with no museum, photograph, or name to contain it. The kraken was not alone. From Norway to Japan, sailors described serpents with shining bodies, burning red crests, and enough length to coil through the waves. Different coastlines produced eerily similar silhouettes. Most reports were impossible to test. A distant whale, a line of dolphins, floating kelp, or pure invention could all become a serpent before reaching port. Distance is an excellent monster maker. Then there is the oarfish. It is the longest bony fish alive, sometimes reaching 8 meters, with metallic skin and a flame-red fin running over its head. Oarfish normally live hundreds of meters down. When sick or disoriented, one may reach the surface, exactly where an ancient crew would be waiting to misunderstand it. At the surface, its ribbon body undulates sideways. Seen between waves, only separated arches appear, creating the illusion of a many-humped animal racing beside the ship. It eats plankton, not sailors. But if the sea serpent had a real-world understudy, the oarfish arrives, already wearing the costume. That resemblance alone is enough to keep the legend breathing. Mermaids are harder to dismiss as one regional mistake. Half-human water beings appear in cultures separated by oceans, carrying different names, personalities, and meanings. On January 9th, 1493, Christopher Columbus recorded 3 mermaid-like figures near the Caribbean. He complained that they were not nearly as beautiful as the paintings promised. His disappointment is strangely revealing. The likely suspects were manatees. They surface upright to breathe, possess flexible forelimbs, and sometimes cradle their young against the chest in surprisingly familiar poses. From far away, anatomy becomes suggestion. That resemblance sounds ridiculous from a clear photograph. It is less ridiculous after months at sea, through glare, mist, and a few seconds of movement beside the hull. Manatees and dugongs belong to the order Sirenia, a scientific name that preserves the old association with sirens even after the animal itself became familiar. They cannot explain every mermaid tradition, and they did not create humanity's fascination with water people. They do explain why some witnesses insisted they had seen one. The unicorn left behind something even more persuasive than an eyewitness account. Medieval churches and royal collections displayed its horn as a physical object. Here, belief could be held and measured. Powder scraped from these horns was sold as protection against poison. Kings paid fortunes for them. The objects were genuine, only the label was wrong. Most famous unicorn horns were narwhal tusks carried south through Arctic trade. A male narwhal's single tooth can grow 3 meters in a perfect natural spiral. To someone who had never seen a narwhal, The horn appeared to prove that a one-horned animal lived somewhere beyond the edge of the known world. Travel accounts of rhinoceroses and antelope added more confusion. A two-horned animal, viewed in profile, can also become one-horned with astonishing ease. Memory then simplifies what perspective has already hidden. There was no white horse hiding in an enchanted forest, but the evidence that convinced Europe was not fake. It belonged to a whale beneath Arctic ice. The Cyclops presents a more dangerous kind of story, because its popular explanation is plausible, visual, and still unproven. It is repeated so often that uncertainty has almost vanished. Prehistoric dwarf elephants once lived on Mediterranean islands, including Sicily and Crete. Their fossil skulls contain a large opening in the center of the face. That opening anchored the trunk. Without an elephant standing nearby for comparison, however, it can look disturbingly like one enormous eye socket. The rest of the skull encourages the mistake. The theory imagines ancient islanders finding these bones in caves and reconstructing a race of one-eyed giants around them. It is a wonderful explanation. The problem is evidence. No surviving ancient text says a Cyclops skull was discovered, and one-eyed beings appear in traditions far beyond Mediterranean elephant fossils. So the skull may have reinforced the legend rather than created it. The honest answer is less satisfying and more interesting. We simply do not know. Uncertainty belongs inside the story. The Roc of Arabian stories was a bird vast enough to darken the sky and lift an elephant. Travelers placed it somewhere beyond the Indian Ocean. Madagascar really did have birds of unbelievable scale. Elephant birds stood around 3 meters tall and laid the largest known eggs of any vertebrate. Even their fragments can feel impossibly oversized. They were flightless, more like colossal ostriches than eagles. But people lived alongside them, handled their eggs, and carried stories far beyond Madagascar. That contact offered myth more than a rumor. Marco Polo later repeated tales of a gigantic bird associated with the region. A real egg larger than a household vessel could make almost any second-hand claim believable. Some versions also absorbed older stories of Garuda and other supernatural birds. The Roc was not one mistaken animal, but a myth assembled along trade routes. Every port contributed another feather. An elephant bird could never carry an elephant. It could, however, supply the egg, the footprint, and the sense of scale that allowed the impossible bird to grow. The final creature did not emerge from an animal at all. The chimera had a lion's head, a goat's body, a serpent's tail, and breath of fire. Its homeland was Lycia, in modern Turkey. There, flames still rise directly from cracks in the rock at a place now called Yanatas, the burning stone. Around 50 gas vents dot the site, and several burn continuously. Long before chemistry, a mountain that breathed fire required a story equal to the spectacle. The earth itself seemed alive. Ancient writers themselves noticed the connection. Pliny described a local mountain burning with a flame that did not die by day or night. The phenomenon was not hidden or fleeting. One later interpretation divided the landscape into animals: lions above, grazing goats along the slope, and snakes below, all joined by the fire beneath them. Geography became anatomy, then a monster. Modern geology points to gases released through reactions deep in the rock. The chemistry is complex, but its effect is wonderfully simple. Stone that appears to burn forever. No lion-goat serpent was hiding there. Yet the strangest feature of the monster, its impossible fire, was copied from something travelers could visit with their own eyes. The location was the witness. That pattern connects all 7. A rare animal, an unfamiliar bone, or a burning landscape enters a story. Each retelling preserves the wonder and edits the details. Myths are not primitive news reports, and finding a possible inspiration does not solve them. It reveals how carefully human imagination watches the real world before changing it. The monsters were probably never real in the form we remember, but the next time an old map warns that something waits beyond the horizon, look twice.